Now, this slide shows about the broad architecture of the IoT. So, if you can look out here, there are four basic layers here, or four basic paradigms which you can discuss. First thing talks about the sensors. And as we have already discussed, IoT is all a game of sensors. You must have a good quality, good precision, good configured sensor which can give you the accurate data, because data need to be foolproof, bug-free data. There should not be any flaws in the data, because if data is flawed, then what you will do with the analysis of the data, that will also be flawed. So we must have a sensor. Now, what kind of sensors to purchase depends upon the application which I want to design and deploy in my IoT network. So I can purchase a temperature sensor, humidity sensor, pressure, motion, lux. There are hundreds of sensors. These are just randomly four or five of them, but there are many sensors here. And what this sensor will do, they will sense the information, because the name is sensors. So they will sense the information, sense the data, capture the data. And then what to do with the data? Give it to the backbone network that comprises of the IoT gateways and the other backbone network, like we can have the ATMs, we can have the Bluetooth network, we can have the mobile ad hoc networks, we can have the delay tolerant networks. So means any kind of network for that matter as such. And now the data can be conveyed either through the wireless means, that means IEEE 802.11 standard to IEEE 802.16 standard, or I can use the cloud computing domain, like we've got platform as a service, software as a service, infrastructure as a service. So I can use any one of them. Either I can use the networks, the wireless networks, or I can use the cloud-based technologies. Even in India, we have got a Meghraj cloud. I think I would have discussed earlier also. It's a cloud called Meghraj, and it has been designed and developed by the NIC. And those of you who are based in Delhi, at Shastri Park near in East Delhi, they have got their office, and they have set up a cloud server there. That's a homegrown cloud made by India, and it's called Meghraj. You can Google it, and it is good that we have got some of our homegrown products which can be used very smoothly, very proficiently in the IT industry. Even we in our own IPU University website, ipu.ac.in, we have hosted onto the cloud server only, and from there the data can be accessed by any end device. So it could be the mobile application, it could be the desktop application, it could be any dynamic website, so anything. So using the mobile app, I can receive the data which is being sensed by the sensors. So data will flow through the intermediate networks, and finally I can receive using my mobile application. So I can send the signals, I can receive the data, I can do any kind of, that depends upon the smart app deployed on the my IoT node. Now, just like we have got a OSI model, on the same lines we have got this layered architecture of the IoT. Now you can look at the top here. There are multiple number of the smartness. So we got smart cities, we have got smart transport, we have got smart health, we have got smart buildings, we have got smart energy, we have got smart industry. So everything is smart. And when we talk of the IoT, we talk of the smartness. Now, what does the smartness actually means? We are looking for a devices which are Wi-Fi enabled. That means which are hooked to the network, any kind of network for that matter, wired, wireless, any kind of network. The line of sight transmission, it should be connected to a network, as simple as that. Plus, it can take some logical decisions based on a predefined set of the conditions. It should take some logical decisions on their own. For example, it should be AI enabled. I can have the artificial intelligence algorithms embedded on the chip in these devices. For example, supervised and non-supervised learning algorithms. It could be k-means, it could be clustering, it could be support vector machine. Many kind of the supervised and the non-supervised learning algorithm exist, which can help the user to take a decision, and then the decision can be implemented as such. So when we talk of the smartness, we are talking of the devices which are on the network, Wi-Fi enabled, plus it has got some amount of the decision making capabilities. Now, what is the quantum of the decision making capabilities? Whether it is on the scale of 1 to 10, If it is 2 or 4 or 6 or 8, that depends upon the particular application and the particular product. But then certain amount of the smartness should be there in the devices. So they all work on the application layer of the model. So when we talk of the application layer, this is what the IoT applications are. So it could be the applications like what we discussed in the forest, in the mountainous terrain, in the desert region, in the ocean seabeds, maybe in any of the hostile or controlled environment, means either in the lab condition or on the land condition. So there will all be the IoT applications, and in the simulation we'll discuss and we'll see how to design the simple application for the IoT network. So we have got a client called Paho Java client. That's the name of the client. It has been written and coded in Java programming language, and it is provided free of cost by the Eclipse Foundation. So we'll see the programming of it tomorrow. We'll do that in the next lecture, how to carry out a simulation using the IoT. And make sure tomorrow every one of you log with your laptops and machine, not with your smartphones, so that when I'm doing it on my machine, parallelly you can replicate it on your machine. So we'll go it slowly, and I will give the demo how to carry out the simulation in IoT, and parallelly you do it on your machine. And I will share the URLs, I will share the code, and make sure that we are able to do it on our own machine. So don't log on with your smartphones tomorrow. Make sure we log in with our machines, with our PCs, so that parallelly you can do it at your end. So beneath the application layer, in the OSI model, we have got presentation layer, session layer, transport layer. Now here all the three layers are clubbed together to create a layer called service and application support layer. So that provides a generic support, that provides specific support. So if you see, there's a orange color bar here on the right hand side that talk of security capabilities. Even in the traditional OSI model, which was introduced by Zimmerman, when we talk of the presentation, the session layer, and even the transport layer for that, but they talk of the cryptography, they talk of security of the data. So if I want to write a secure code, on which layer it will work, on which layer it will be deployed, on the presentation and the session layer. Same way here we got a service and the application support layer that provides the inherent security to the IoT. So means I can write a secure code programming. It is something like if I'm working on the web, and my application always work on the application layer of the OSI model. That means my web browsers, the Mozilla Firefox, Netscape Navigator, IE, whichever web browser you are using, we are working on the topmost layer, application layer of the OSI model. And when you open the web browser, in the address bar of the web browser, you write a URL. Let's say hotmail.com, gmail.com, rediffmail.com. So your browser at that stage is generating a HTTP request, hypertext transfer protocol request, that will be routed using the HTTP protocol to the web server, right? Now this is the insecure mode of transmission, means your data is not getting protected. Now what if I want my data to protect it? In that case, what I will do, I will not be using the HTTP protocol. What I will be using, uh, is the HTTPS protocol, hypertext transfer protocol, in the secure mode. And my data will all be encrypted now. It will flow through the presentation and session layer, that because they handle the security aspect of the application, and then it will flow to the web server, and the web server can now receive the data on the port number 443. So web server uses the port number 80 for insecure application, and web server uses the port number 443 for secure applications. So all the general support or the specific support required for your IoT device, it all is confined within the service and the application support layer. Even when we discuss the IoT device life cycle in the last lecture, we talk of the software upgrade, the hardware upgrade, the management, and everything happens on this single layer, that talk of the service and the application layer. Even the management of the IoT devices, it all happens on this layer. So it's a very generic, and if you're doing it for a particular company, it will be specific to that. For example, if I'm purchasing a sensor from Texas Instrument, so it will fall into category of the specific support, that the specific support has to be provided by a particular company for the management of the IoT device. Then we come to the network layer that talks of the networking capabilities and the transport capabilities. Means the device will have the IP address, the device will have the port numbers, because port numbers or port addresses which are 16-bit number that works on the transport layer of the model. So how many port numbers are possible per device, or rather in general for that matter, 2 raised to power 16, because 16-bit wide are the port number. So total number of port number which a device can use is 0 to 65535, because if you roll to raised to power 16, it comes to be 65536. And since the indexing starts from 0, so the number of the port number available are 0 to 65535. So that huge port number is available. Now can I use all these port number? The answer is no. Because the first 1024 port number, that is 2 raised to power 10, they are all predefined. Like for example, HTTP, FTP, Telnet, remote procedure calls that you work on port number 111. So many kind of the predefined transport layer protocols are already existing. Even the network layer protocol already existing that uses the port number in the range of 0 to 1023. So, and beyond that, yes, we can use it. So for the IoT also, we have got a predefined port number. So we'll discuss in tomorrow's simulation. What is the port number on which I should start my server? Then we got networking capabilities. I've already discussed. All the devices will have either the IMEI number or the IMSI number. Same way, if you're using a node or a PC, they will have the IP address and the MAC address. So when you talk of network layer, we're talking of the IP addressing, or we're talking of the IMSI numbers. So every device will have one or these two number. Then only they can be configured, and then only they can communicate with the other devices on the network. Now at the bottom we'll have the device layer. So we can have multiple kind of devices to which the IoT node will be connected to. So it could be the switches, it could be the routers, it could be the gateways. Now for configuring the routers, you might have studied in your network subject regarding the routing protocols which we use in wired network. So we got RIP, OSPF and BGP. Routing information protocol, we have got border gateway protocol, and we have got open shortest path first protocol. So these are the routing protocol which we use in the wired network. Whereas if we talk of wireless communication, we do not use any of these protocol, because in wired network we always make an assumption that the devices will not move around. They have no mobility. So they are fixed. Wherever they are fixed. So it is always easier to calculate the shortest path using the OSPF protocol, open shortest path first protocol, which uses the de Castro algorithm, because de Castro was the world's most popular algorithm for determination of the shortest path. But when we talk of the wireless network or the wireless devices, here the mobility is induced. We cannot ask the user to stay at single position for a long duration of time. If he wants to move, he will definitely move out. So we do not use the routing protocols of the wired network. We use a routing protocol for the wireless network. And what are these? They are like DSR, DSDV, AODV. DSR is a dynamic source routing protocol. AODV is a ad hoc on-demand distance vector routing protocol. We have got DSDV, destination sequenced distance vector routing protocol. So routing protocol for the wireless network are different, whereas routing protocol for the wired network are different. So when you talk of the device layer, we have not only got devices and gateway, we got routers and switches also. Device layer is full of devices, but all these devices will use certain routing protocol for transmission of the data. Because what will happen with these devices? They need to share the information, they need to route the data, they need to transmit the data or the message or a packet from one node to another node. So they have to use certain routing scheme. No routing can be done in the network if you do not use any routing scheme. Routing scheme is a prerequisite for movement or the migration or forwarding of the data from one node to another node. Now let us say, suppose if I want to measure the performance of the network. So we have got certain metrics like MDR, message delivery ratio. And we say number of message delivered divided by number of message generated. For example, if the number of messages generated are 1000 and 600 messages got delivered from the source to the destination. So we say 600 by 1000. So what is my efficiency of performance? 60%. for that matter. So we need to have certain metrics on the basis of which we can calculate the performance of the network. That means the performance of the IoT messages which are being getting transmitted from the source to the destination. Now, what about these messages, 400 messages? Where did they got lost? Maybe they got stuck in some intermediate devices and they could not be forwarded to the next device. And we know in wireless network, one of the biggest problem is since the mobility is there, not every device is connected to every other device. There could be a span of time where you're totally isolated. You're not connected to any other network. So in that case, the messages which are getting buffered at your devices will not be able to move forward. Now, how long they will survive? Maybe till the battery of the phone is there, means because we know with every CPU cycle the node's energy get drained off, node's battery get drained off. So your messages will be there in your device as long as the battery exists. Moment your battery levels, the energy of the node is falling down, the message will get lost. Or maybe uh, the messages get timed out because we know every message that gets generated into the network have got a TTL attached to it, time to live. So with every passage of time, if the TTL is decrementing, moment it reaches to zero, then the node will not forward that particular message. So how long the message survive in the network depends upon the congestion also on the devices in the network. So there is no definite answer to this problem of how long will the message take to deliver from the source to destination in the area of the wireless network. It may happen instantly or it may take long amount of time to get shipped or to delivered from one network to another network, finally reaching to the destination. Now this slide shows about the IoT architecture when we bring together multiple entities. Like we got data analysis coming into picture, we have got a mobile and web application coming into picture, we got analytics coming into picture, we have got cloud computing coming into picture. So first thing first, what need to be done is we can partition into two half to have a better understanding of it. First is the role of the sensors, actuators, and the smart devices. In a typical IoT system or IoT network, they play a very important role. So first of all, data should be sensed. Data should be captured. What kind of data? It could be data pertaining to atmospheric temperature or pressure, humidity, soil condition, or it could be for the sensors for predicting earthquake, means that keep a track of the seismic vibrations. So it could be any kind of the sensors for that matter. So sensors, actuators, and smart devices will be connected to the gateways. And what is the limit? There is no upper limit. You can have hundreds and hundreds and thousands of sensors which can be connected to your gateway. So it depends upon the configuration of gateway, how many number of devices it can actually connect to. Now, once the data has been sensed by the sensor, it will be given to the gateway. Now, what will the gateway do? Either use the cloud gateway and forward the data, upload the data through the clouds. Because nowadays we have got the Google Cloud platform is there, we have got IBM Cloud, we have got Watson Cloud, the Meghraj Cloud. So many clouds have actually come up. Microsoft has introduced Azure. So many number of the Google Cloud or many of the cloud platforms are available which can be exploited for the transfer or the transmission of the data. Or what we can do, we can have a stream data processors and we can have the sensor data can directly be given to certain control applications and the processing can get started. So it all depends upon how you plan your IoT network. Or I can give the data, I can have a collection or an aggregation of data in the form of data lake at one place, and then I can deploy various or apply various data warehousing and data mining algorithms using a big data warehouse. So I've got now once the IoT in a typical IoT experiment, once you have captured the data, there could be millions of bytes in that data, many records. So I can use either traditional RDBMS like MySQL Server or DB2 or Informix or Ingress or Sybase, any kind of, or I can use a typical big data tools like MongoDB is there, Hadoop is there, that works with the MapReduce framework. So it all depends upon my big data warehouse, what is the potential of my data, how I deal with my particular data. Then I can apply the business logic to the data which I got captured. So if those of you who are good in programming would be aware of the MVC architecture, model, view, and the controller architecture. So in the controller architecture of the MVC, we always talk of the business logic, business function, business rules. That talks of how the data which has been sensed or captured will now be processed. What kind of validation and verification technique need to be applied. So all business logic need to be, logic means your rules, your business specific rules. The validations of the data need to be done at this particular layer, and then I can forward the same thing through the web application or to the mobile application to the end user. So end user can receive the validated and the verified data coming from the business logic or the business layer of the architecture. Once the data is there, I have done the what typical data sciences teaches us. You do the cleaning of the data, you do the compilation of the data, treatment of null values is to be done. Once you are through with that, what we can do now, we can bring the machine learning algorithms, the supervised and the non-supervised learning algorithms into picture. And then I can start my job. Means again, my requirement has to be clear to my mind. That even if I am applying supervised and the non-supervised, what is my need? Why I am doing it? So we have the training of the data set, testing of the data set. Everything need to be done at once the data has been captured. So good data analytics need to be applied, and data analytics again is a very wide field. There are many number of the business tools, BI tools, what we say, like Tableau is one of them. There are many number of the BI tools which I can use for the good analysis of the data. And again, my requirement has to be very clear in my mind that even if I'm doing analysis of my data, what is my need? What is my objective? That should be clear before you start with the application of these algorithms. So IoT can be blended with a data science, with the field of artificial intelligence, because once you have captured the data, then you need to come up with a viability, that what you are doing, what is your purpose, what is the need, what is the objective, why you have captured the data. So that has to be clear in our mind, because if I do not process the data well, then the entire process of data capturing is useless. So once the data has been there in place, either I process it myself, or what can I do, I sell it off to those entities, to those companies who are in need of such a data. Because there can be two things: either I myself process the data, or I sell it over. Let's say I charge $10 per 100 records, and I outsource this data, I sell off this data to the companies who are in need of such a data. Or what I can do, I can provide it free of cost to the academician and researchers. For example, if you see Kaggle is a very good data set portal where hundreds and thousands of records are available free of cost. So you don't have to do the real-time IoT experiment on your own by spending your money. You can go to any of the dataset portals and look out for your requirement, and then accordingly you can download the dataset and then can use it in your IoT experiments. So IoT provides the supports with the help of these two protocols for the routing of the messages. So there are Constraint Application Protocol, COAP, and the other is the MQTT. It's called Message Queue Telemetry Transport. And it is also pronounced as a mosquito, because if you look at the spelling of the mosquito and if you look at the MQTT, it's almost very close to each other. So we also call the MQTT protocol as a mosquito protocol for routing. But real name is Message Queue Telemetry Transport. And what is COAP? Constraint Application Protocol. So these two are the most widely used protocol in the IoT network. Now, COAP or Constraint Application Protocol is a constraint application protocol from the core. Now, what is that core? Constraint Resource Environments. And it was first introduced by the IETF. IETF is the Internet Engineering Task Force. Now, what did the IETF said? That we want to provide a routing scheme to the devices that works in a constrained environment. Now, what is that constrained environment? Means the environment where devices are very low on resources. Means they have got a limited buffer space, limited amount of flash memory, limited amount of cache memory. The processor is very old, not a processor with a good number of CPU cycles. So everything is very constant, it's very poor. the devices are very poorly configured. They are not in good in configurations. So these we say are the constrained devices. For example, we are good, we are happy, we are blessed that we are based in Delhi NCR, wherein we can carry out the online education. But look just around, have a look at the remote cities, the tier 2, tier 3 cities, where they may not have a good network infrastructure. So they are the constrained environment resources, or the students may not be able to afford the laptops and the desktop machines or the smartphones, like students studying in the government schools. Their parents are not financially well off. They are many of them come from the slums, the juggies, the areas where their parents are maybe working as a rickshaw puller, or they may be working as a hawker, so maybe working as a salesman in the shops. So it could be those are the people who are very living the life on the edge, means they are living just hand to mouth existence is there. So these are the person we say have the constrained environment, because they're not blessed with resources, maybe for some reason or the other. Either they didn't work hard, or they did not have the good education in their childhood, or maybe they could not get the good opportunities in life and they could not get a good job. So for one reason or the other, they are working in a very constant environment. Same way, we have got devices here which are poorly configured, very low on resources. And even if the student, like the student belonging to a community which is not financially good, maybe some of the problem exists for one reason or the other, and even if he wants to attend the online classes, he cannot do it. Why? Because he does not have a smartphone, he doesn't have a desktop, or he doesn't have a laptop, or he doesn't have a PC. So he wants to study. There are many good students in government schools, many number of good students are there, but because of their family constraints, they are not able to excel, they're not able to study well. So providing a good network infrastructure, providing good quality education to these students is really a challenge for society as well as for the government. So coming back to the typical concept of the constrained environment, the COAP follows a model called client-server model, which I hope everyone is already familiar with. Client-server is a model which is widely used in web-based communication. When we talk of the internet, we always talk of the two-tier client-server architecture, or we talk of the model view controller architecture, MVC controller architecture. And here the clients make a request to the servers, and servers send back the responses. So we'll use the HTTP request to forward the messages, forward the data, forward the information from the client to the server. Server will process it. So there are many of the server-side technologies which exist today. Like we have got, if you talk of the advanced Java, we've got Servlet, we've got JSP, EJB, Hibernate, Struts, Spring. Many number of the advanced Java technologies are there which works on the server. Or we can have the ASP.NET and the ADO.NET, ActiveX server pages, and the ActiveX data objects. They all work on the web server side. So we can use these technologies to process the client data, and then we again generate the HTTP request and give it back to the client machine. So all the information flow over the web will be done using the HTTP protocol only, and the response will be embedded in the HTML language, because browser understand only the HTML language. So once the web server has prepared a response after processing the client request, it will generate the HTML language, it will generate the response and embed it into HTML language, and then encapsulate it as a part of the HTTP response and send it back to the client machine. And then the client, we have got already the web browser is there on the client machine. In fact, today's web browser are very smart, very intelligent as compared to the browsers, let's say 4 or 5 years back. So today's web browser have got the JVM embedded inside Java virtual machines. They understand the web terminologies, they know what the HTML language is, they know what the XML language is, they are familiar with all the tags, they are familiar with the CSS cascading style sheets. So browsers today are far smart, far more intelligent the browser which was there, let's say 4 or 5 years back. Now some of the broad features of the COAP which we see, COAP architecture. COAP runs over the UDP protocol. So it's a superimposed, or it's a protocol that overrides on the UDP. UDP we all know, it's a connectionless protocol as compared to the TCP, which is connection oriented protocol. Now what is the difference between these two terms? In the connectionless category, means in the UDP protocol category, we do not route the messages through a single continuous stream. The messages are generated, they are numbered, and they are just thrown onto the network. And all the messages can take place the same path or a different path to reach to a destination. And what will the destination machine do? Carry out the reassembling. Now, since the packets are taking different path, it may happen that the packet number 6 reaches, let's say, later, and the packet number 10 reaches earlier. So what will the destination machine has to do? It has to wait for all the packets to first of all reach to the destination, and then it will carrying out the reassembling of it. Whereas TCP is good. TCP is a transmission control protocol. It is connection oriented. Here the packets will be numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and so on. And then we'll have a logical stream which will connect the source to the destination of the transport layer, and all the packet will be routed or forwarded through this continuous stream. So and it all takes time, so it's slow in the sense, but all the packets are guaranteed to reach to a destination, and all the packet will reach sequentially through the logical layer, which is connection. So connection oriented is good in the sense that you are assured of the delivery of the data packets, which does not happen in the case of the UDP, the unreliable datagram protocol, or the user datagram protocol. So clients and server communicate with each other through the connectionless mode, and all the data is all transmitted in the form of the datagrams. So retries and reordering are implemented in the application stack, because it may happen that the destination informs the source that I have received the packet number 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10. But this packet number 4, 5, 6 I have not received. So what will the source do? Retransmit it. So multiple number of times the retransmission might be required in the case of the UDP protocol. So because it's unreliable. But the packet delivery is very fast in the UDP, because packets are given the choice to take multiple paths to reach from the source to the destination. So some of the packet take shorter path, some of the packet take longer path, and maybe some of the packet don't ever reach because they have taken a wrong path, and slowly and steadily every router will keep on decrementing their TTL, and maybe their TTL reaches 0 and packets are dumped. They are just thrown out from the network. They are no more forwarded by the intermediate routers. So maybe some of the packet never ever reach to a destination. So what will the destination do? Again send a request back to the source. Just for example, again, if you have remembered in the Tenenbaum and the Bruce Frozen book, we talk of we got a positive acknowledgement, we got negative acknowledgement, and we have got a frame control and the error control mechanisms which are deployed, and wherein we inform the source that I have received the packet number this, but this these many packets have missed out. So kindly retransmit or reorder or retry will be done multiple number of the times. So removing the need for the TCP may allow full IP networking small microcontrollers. Now that's also an objective. Not every time I require the connection oriented protocol. If my data is not critical, if my data is not financial in nature, if the data does not have a commercial worth, then it's a small data, minuscule data, which does not have any value. Then it can be routed through the COAP protocol. So we do not require the TCP protocol every now and then. So we can remove the need for the TCP protocol, and that also allows full IP networking in the small microcontroller, because the IoT devices, for example, I've got a smart home where all my nodes are in the overlapping transmission range, and they do not require the external network, or they do not require the cloud environment to get forwarded as such. So all the devices can go in the line of sight transmission. The devices can easily see each other. They are in the overlapping transmission range. Then I do not require the connection oriented scheme. Even the connectionless can work successfully fine. So that depends upon my application, my requirement, that whether I require the a protocol which is connection oriented or the protocol which is connectionless. So if your data is not critical worth, then definitely what we can do, we can take the help of these UDP protocol, because COAP works on the top of the UDP protocol, and the packets can then be forwarded easily between the devices in a IoT network where the devices are in the overlapping transmission range. So what does the COAP does? It allows the UDP broadcast and multicast to be used for addressing. So what we have got unicast, we have got broadcast, and we have got multicast. Three kind of the casting exist in the network, which I hope everyone is familiar with. Unicast means one to one. Broadcast means one to many. And multicasting means one to selective few, not for everyone. For example, you would have seen in the WhatsApp also when you upload your status, the WhatsApp asks you, do you want all your contacts to see it or only few selective contacts to see your status? So you can pick up that these are the contacts which are confidential to me, which are close to me, and these are my friends, neighbors, and relatives, and only they can see this status, no, but not the everyone. So I can decide in the IoT network that whether all the devices should receive the data which I am sending, or only one device should receive the data, or let's say 5 out of 50 devices should receive the data. So I can go for unicasting, broadcasting, or the multicasting. Now that again depends upon my IoT experiment, the aim and the objective of my IoT experiment. So that should be very clear in our mind कि हम objective क्या है, what I would like to do. Now let's look at the message format for the COAP, the Constant Application Protocol. So first thing, the point to remember and point to take away is the COAP will always be used for the devices which are in a constrained resource environment, what we call CORE, introduced by the IETF, Internet Engineering Task Force. And they have published the RFC, request for comment, which talks about the COAP protocol. And since the devices are constrained in nature, we can't expect the devices to follow the TCP protocol. So freedom is given to them that whatever is a mode of communication, you do it, you use it, but forward the message. So the protocols that has been designed for the IoT is MQTT and COAP. COAP, Constrained Application Protocol. The name itself tells this is a protocol meant for the constrained devices. What are constrained devices? Devices which are low on resources, having a very low, which are very lowly configured or poorly configured. That means having low amount of the buffer space, low amount of the RAM, low amount of the disk space, processor which is not up to date, which is a legacy processor, maybe obsolete processors. The software, the operating system of the device is very bad or very old as such. No latest software hardware upgrade has been done on the devices. The battery of the device is very of the low mAh, milliampere hour, because that is the unit in what we measure the strength or the intensity of the batteries in the smartphones. So if the device is such a manner, we use a COAP protocol, constant application protocol. Otherwise, what we will do if the device is not resource constrained, we will use the MQTT, message queuing telemetry transport, also called as a mosquito protocol. So this is a COAP message format. We can look around it. We have got 4 layers: version number, type, token length, code, and the message ID. So when you talk of the version number, it's a 2-bit unsigned integer indicating the version number. What is the version of the COAP protocol you are using? So we've got version 1, we have got version 1.1, we have got version 2 for the COAP protocol. Then T is a type. Now what does the type indicate? It's a 2-bit unsigned integer indicating the message type, which could be confirmable or non-confirmable. Means confirmable means you require the acknowledgement to come. Non-confirmable, don't worry, just receive the packet. So we are not worried about the delivery of the message to the destination. Whether message will be delivered or not, neither we are expecting the destination to send back the acknowledgement to the source regarding the acceptance or delivery of the message. Now TKL becomes the token length. That's a 4-bit length that indicates the total size of the message which is going to be transmitted from the source to the destination. Then we have a code. It is a code response. And now whenever you are doing a web-based transmission or a transmission on the network, even if I take the example of web-based transmission, when the response comes from the web server to the client, so the HTTP response will have a status code attached to it. So either the number starting from 100 series or 200 series or 300 series or 400 series or 500 series. So we have got HTTP status codes which are generated by the web servers for the web clients. So we would have seen the like error number 404, page not found. So this is called HTTP status code. This is a code number sent by the web server to the web client informing him that the page he was looking up for could not be found on the web, could not be found on the server. Or we can have, let's say, redirection that might be taking place from one web server to another web server. Then we use the status code 500. So different status codes are there for every network that indicates the status or the health of the network, as well as the processing, because the client request has been processed or not. And if it has successfully got processed, then you use that particular status code. If there is a failure, then you use the other set of the status codes. So there are status codes which are indicating whether client request is successful, client request has been processed or not. So here also the COAP has got their own status codes which indicates the status of the message which has been transmitted from the source to the destination. Then last field on the first field is a message ID. It's ID because every message is going to be generated onto the network will have a unique number attached to it. So this is a 16-bit number. So how many number possible? 2 raised to power 16. That means 0 to 65535. So every message which is going to be get generated onto the IoT network, and where routing is done with the help of the COAP protocol, will have a unique message ID attached to it. Just like we human beings have got an Aadhaar card number in India, that's our social security number. So everyone has got a unique Aadhaar card, and then whenever we go for any government schemes, like we would have all gone for vaccination drives, we register on the CoWIN app using our Aadhaar card number because that's a unique number given to us. Or you go for gas connection or any kind of the you want to avail the government scheme, you have to use that particular ID which has been assigned to you for availing the schemes as issued by the government. Then we got a token. Token indicate the actual content of the message. So token and the payload, they are both merged together. Payload indicates the actual content, what you are transmitting. So that becomes a part of the token field, or they become a part of the payload field. For example, here again you can say, let's say truck is moving on a city road. It is carrying certain amount of the quantity or material loaded with it. So driver of the truck will more like a header, and the content which are loaded into the truck is the payload. So payload is the actual data which is going to be transmitted from the source to the destination or from one IoT device to another device. So payload is that data which is actually moving. So either I can write in the payload category or I can write in the token category because it is acceptable in both the things. Options means if there are certain other option you would like to specify, so flexibility is there, but then hardly there is any reason which you require the options field. So, but then they have given the because when you design a message format, the format always has to be futuristic in nature. You should see certain fields are blank. For example, you might have seen in the TCP and the UDP header format, there are certain fields which are reserved, certain bits which are reserved. Now, what does that reserve mean? That means they're not used now, but maybe in the next 5 to 7 years when required, then they will start be using. So options are the few flexible options which are not being used currently, but maybe another 4 to 6 years when more IoT networks experiments will be done, then we'll start might using the option field also. So that's a typical message format for the COAP protocol, the constant application protocol. Now let's look for the fundamental difference between these two routing protocol, the MQTT and the COAP. The MQTT uses the publisher subscriber model. So MQTT does not use the typical request response paradigm, just like what the other normal protocols in the internet world uses. You send a request, get the request processed, the server send the response back to you. So most of the protocols work around the request response paradigm. But the Mosquitto protocol uses another concept protocol publish subscriber that we'll discuss what is publish subscriber model used by the MQTT. The MQTT will use a central broker. Now broker is a process running within the web server. So when we discuss about the MQTT protocol in detail, we'll discuss about the role of the broker also. What is the roles and responsibilities of a broker in a server? So MQTT uses a central broker to dispatch messages coming from the publisher to the client. So broker will interact with the publisher. Broker will interact with the subscriber. So broker is an intermediate entity. It's more like an agent. Just like we have got, if there is a if I want to set up a deal between the two parties, what I will do, there are many number of the brokers, the agents, which help me to set up a deal between the two parties. So maybe it could be a business deal, financial deal, or any other kind of the deal. So broker play a very important role in that. Another difference which you can see is COAP is essentially one-to-one protocol, very similar to the HTTP protocol. Means the source node will generate a message, send it to the destination. So though the feature is available for unicasting, broadcasting and multicasting, but primarily what we have been seeing is QAP protocol uses the unicasting rather than going from broadcasting or the multicasting. But nobody is stopping you. You can even use COAP because the flexibility is there. The specification of the protocol says that yes, you can use it for all three: unicasting, broadcasting, and the multicasting. So nobody is stopping, but it all depends upon the application. And MQTT is an event-oriented protocol, while COAP is more suitable for the state transfer. So MQTT is dynamic, it is interactive, it will respond to you, whereas COAP is more primarily designed for the state transfer. Now, what does the state here means? Again, if I take an example from web, from the internet world, we have got two things there: session and the state. Now, what does the word session means? When a client is generating a request, and suppose the client opens a web browser, on the address bar of the web browser, he types the name of the URL, and because he would like to get it processed. So the browser of his machine will generate the HTTP request, and the request will be, now there are two ways how we forward the request, either using a do get or a do post function. Do get is non-secure, do post is secure communication. So the request is forwarded to the web server. Now once the web server receives the request, now web server will come in a talking mode to you, interactive mode to you. So what will the web server do? For a given client request, the web server will start a session where the server will talk to the client machine as such. So who's starting a session? Always the web server. But on whose request? Always the client. Can a client start a session? Answer is no. So client will only send a request to the server, and server will process the request and may or may not start a session. So it all depends upon the web server. It may consider the request, he may not consider the request. And then if the session is started, now the client can interact with the server. And every session will be tracked with the help of the session ID. So we'll have a unique 16-bit number dedicated to that particular session, which has been started by the web server for that particular client. And now the communication can start happening between the client and server, maybe for a few seconds, for a few minutes, or few hours. Now, how long will the session survive? That depends upon the congestion on the web server. Maybe the server is not overloaded right now, and server may not terminate a session. But if there are too many requests on the server may have to manage all these sessions. So it might temporarily or permanently just garbage collect one of the session, may close down the session abruptly also, because so many number of requests are there on the server, and server has to do the task of load balancing, and may have to just terminate some of the sessions which are very long overdue, or where the client is not doing any event handling, he is just in a passive mode. Then server may close down some of the session abruptly for that matter. So how long will the session survive? That depends upon the server as such. Or let us say if the client has done his job, he has visited a particular website, his transactions are over, and he himself can close that particular website. He can log out from that particular portal, and then also the session will get closed down as such. So either client can do it voluntarily on his own once his activity on that particular portal is over, or maybe the server can also do it when the server is overloaded with so many number of the requests, and his server cannot entertain the request for so many number of the clients. So it can happen both ways, but ultimately it all depends upon the server. How long will the session survive for that particular on that particular server? Now we can take a simple example also. For example, here today on Thursday we had a class scheduled at 2 p.m. So if I replicate the same example, I become a server and you all become the client. So I start a Cisco WebEx session. So I have started a session where I have already given a link to all of you, and you clicked on that link and you joined this particular session. So it's something like same way you type the URL and you enter into the session as such. Now I can block a particular student also. I can lock the meeting also, or I can just evict some of the, if there are certain, for example, in a business meeting or in the corporate where certain nuisances are being done by anybody, then a particular person can be evicted out. That means the session has been closed for that particular person. Now here I am sharing a single session for so many number of the students. But in a real-time environment, when we talk of the financial transaction, the sessions are not shared. It is always one-on-one. You send a request to a server will set up a session for you. And then the communication between the client and the server will be done one-on-one basis. But here I'm sharing a session among the multiple number of the students directly at one go. So I have shared the link, everyone has joined the link, and you may leave the meeting. Some of the times you do it. Many of the students leave the meeting, maybe they are having some important work, or they're not interested in lecture, whatever could be the reason that is personal to a student as such. So on the voluntary basis he has quit the session, or when a class is over, then I as a server will close down the session for everyone. So session is a small duration or a time or long duration of time when both the client and the server are hooked on or connected to each other. Now we come to the state. Now the properties of the session is what we say are the state. For example, here your machine which you are using to get onto the network, the machine which you are using getting connected to the Cisco WebEx. Now what is the IP address of the machine? What is the MAC address of the machine? What is the operating system you have installed on your machine? Same thing applies to me. What is the IP address of my machine? What is the MAC address of my machine? What is the operating system installed on my machine? What is the web browser you are using for getting live on the session? So when we talk of the state of the session, we talk properties of the session. The date and the time on which the session is getting created, that will also come in the property. So all these properties will be freezed for this particular session. So you logged into this session using this machine IP address. Cisco has recorded your IP address of the machine. Cisco has recorded the MAC address of your machine. Cisco has recorded that you were alive in this session on this date for this much amount of the time. That means duration of the session. And you cannot temper them. You cannot alter them. They will remain confined there forever. So you cannot change the state of the session. Once you have become a part of the session, the properties will remain there. It is just like, for example, using my smartphone, I capture a photograph. I take a snap of any event. Then we can look at some of the cameras, some many or rather all of them, give the head date and time that this photograph was captured on this date at this time. Now the entire image is freezed. You cannot modify it. You cannot, though there are certain tools like online processing tools are there, which like Photoshop is there. You can fiddle with the images also. But if you look in an authentic manner, when no piracy is there, no photoshopping is there, then that frame is freezed forever, and you cannot change the properties of that particular photograph. So if the tree was there behind you, that tree will remain there, unless until you Photoshop it and then remove that particular tree. But in our case, the state of the session will be freezed forever. You cannot modify or tamper or fiddle with the properties of the particular session. MQTT protocol will start tomorrow because that will take time.